Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Bite Size, where we take last Sunday's message and turn it into a bite-sized episode for you to enjoy on the go. This week, let's talk about the you effect. Well, it's pretty safe to assume that everybody has that one friend who tends to have a huge effect on every situation that they're in. I mean, just think about it for a second. Think about that one friend who always, no matter what, seems to make every situation better. I mean, for example, they're probably the life of every party that they walk into. I mean, they walk into a room and the room immediately brightens up. Or if you're going on a trip, they're that one person that when somebody invites you, you want to be like, wait, are they coming? Because if they're coming, I'm definitely going to be coming. Or they just tend to always be extremely happy all the time about everything. And they're always happy, and it's always happy. Always. Or maybe you have a friend who is the complete opposite. I mean, they walk into a room and all of a sudden the room gets really cold. And then out of nowhere, this really creepy lime green light just starts to appear. And then they start singing scary songs about taking over the world. And then you realize that your friend is probably a Disney villain. It's never happened to you? Just me? Oh, okay. But really though, that person, they're always negative. You never want to hang around them. You never really want to be around them because no matter what the situation is, they tend to always find the worst in everything, or they're just always generally extremely unhappy. That's what we're going to talk about today, is what we like to call the you effect, or the effect that you have on the people that are around you. And no matter what, everybody has some kind of effect on those around them, even if they don't realize it. Now, you might be saying to yourself, oh no, I don't really have an effect on the people around me. I mean, the me effect is pretty much null and void. But what's crazy is that's not true. Everybody, whether they realize it or not, has an effect on the people around them. I mean, just look at married couples. Any married couple you see, if they've been together for any length of time, they start to resemble one another. They start acting like one another. They start picking up the same kind of traits, or the way they talk, or the way they think about things, or even the things that they like, or even the way that they act. It kind of starts to meld together. And maybe you have a best friend that you've had for a really long time. You'll notice after a while, you and that best friend kind of start acting together. It's almost as if you share a brain together and you just kind of think of things at the same time, which, while creepy, is also incredibly cool. And so that's what we want to talk about, is your influence. That is a big word that basically just means the effect that you have around people. I mean, the way that we mostly use the word influence now is with social media. If you think about it, on Instagram or on TikTok, there's social media influencers everywhere, and they're constantly trying to influence the world around them to want the things that they want or buy the things that they endorse, and that's how they use their effect on the world around you. So how should we as Christians use this effect for good? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at a story where someone used their effect to have a big impact. Now, the story that we're looking at comes from the New Testament, and we're talking about Jesus. Now, Jesus had a big impact on the world around him. He used to go around places for 3 years of his ministry, and he would minister to people, he would talk to people, he would heal people, and eventually he got a pretty big following. Now, they were probably there because, one, they probably heard that some random dude was shoving dirt in people's eyes, and I, for one, know that if I heard about a guy shoving dirt in people's eyes, that would probably intrigue me. Or maybe they needed something. Maybe they had somebody in their family who needed healing, or maybe they themselves needed healing, or maybe they were just trying to see what this guy was all about. But no matter what reason they were there for, there was a huge following around him. And in one particular story, we find that they're out in the middle of nowhere listening to Jesus speak, and then all of a sudden the people get extremely hungry. I mean, like, probably ravishingly hungry, because It's probably hard to find food out in the middle of nowhere. So we find Jesus with his 12 disciples and 5,000 people. That's just counting the men, not the women, not the children. But we found 5,000 plus people all of a sudden in the need of food. So since sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. That is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up to a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near, and when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Imagine, if you will, for a second, this scene. Jesus is asking these people, how are we going to feed everybody? And Philip, being the probably realistic one of the group, says, excuse me, Jesus, that's a whole lot of people. And if we try to feed all of these people, that's at least, if not more, than a half a year's wages. So I don't really know how we're going to get these people fed. But thankfully, the scriptures don't stop right there, and it continues. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. How far will they go among so many?" We have maybe kind of an answer to our question at this point of how we're going to feed all these people. Andrew at that point's like, well, Jesus, this kid's got 5 pieces of bread and some fish, but I don't really know how that's going to feed everybody. So just imagine, if you will, 5 rolls from your favorite restaurant and 2 pieces of fish for 5,000 plus people. Seems pretty impossible, right? Not for Jesus, though. At that point, he basically says, "Oh, that's perfect. That's more than we need." And he calls the kid over and he's like, "Kid, can I borrow your food?" And the kid's like, "Yes, Jesus, you can borrow my food. That'd be great." And Jesus is all, "Awesome. Disciples, disperse the food." And the disciples are all like, "But Jesus, there's not enough food." And Jesus is all like, "Trust me, disciples, there's plenty of food." And you know what? There was. The disciples started distributing out this food after Jesus blessed it, and it didn't run out. Just imagine, if you will, Mary Poppins style. They're dipping into this basket, pulling it out, and dipping into this basket and pulling it out, and it never runs out. They had so much food that they had leftovers. That right there is pretty unimaginable. I mean, that is just mind-blowingly cool. So let's ask a simple question. Who in this story do we think had the most impact? Was it A, Jesus, who clearly did the most by blessing the food, pulling his little miracle magic out, and it's like, bam, food everywhere, Mary Poppins style? Is it 2, the disciples, who were like, well, Jesus, we clearly know what to do. We're gonna get this little kid and get all of his food and make it go everywhere. Maybe, somehow. Those seem like 2 pretty good answers, right? But they weren't the ones who had the most impact. The person who had the most impact in this story was actually the little boy, because he was willing to take what little amount that he had, and he was willing to give that up. And when it comes to you affecting the world around you, it's all about being willing to show up and use what little you have. But before that's possible, we need to rethink the way that we think about our influence. You see, it's not about knowing more people or doing more or having more. It's all about being willing to use what Jesus gives you. I mean, if the little boy hadn't thought that he had any influence on the world, and he'd have been like, "Yo, Jesus, I just got 5 pieces of bread and some fish. What am I gonna do with that?" there wouldn't have been any story to tell. But because he was ready and able and willing to give what some people saw as just a little amount, because he was willing to give that, Jesus was able to do way more with that than he could do with anything else. What I want you to do is think about somebody in your life who's had a positive impact on you. What was it that enabled them to have that influence on your life? And the same way that others have impacted you, you have the same ability to impact others in your life as well. And that's just part of the you effect that you have. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Bite Sized. If you've missed an episode, you can click right down here for past episodes. And if you want more great content, click right here in the subscribe section. And we'll catch you next time for another episode of Bite Sized.